Okay. Hello, my name's Anne Ramsay. I'm the VP of Education here at OneAdvanced. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name's Chris Quickfall, founder and chief executive of Cognassist.
Lovely. We're here today, Chris and I, is to talk about an exciting partnership between Cognassist and OneAdvanced. So we're going to keep it very conversational today, Chris. And I think what we need to do is really get down into the detail of the why. So why did OneAdvanced and why did Cognassist come together to feel that we needed to celebrate the learner and the learner journey? So if you want to kick us off, and then I'll lead on from a OneAdvanced perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from Cognassist's perspective, what we really want to do is get an understanding of, or help education organizations and their educator understand those hidden needs that a learner has. And every brain's different, so every individual learns slightly differently. If we can make that visible, then the educator and the learner hopefully can have better learning outcomes. But one of the challenges, we're a standalone software product, and always thought it would be phenomenal if we could sit within someone else's, if they were a primary application like OneAdvanced, and we could sit behind their front door and just introduce far less friction into the process so that the educator doesn't need to move between different systems. It's all contained within one environment.
Absolutely. And I think from a OneAdvanced perspective, we very much, put the learner at the heart of our development, but also around the partnerships. So really having that real joined up learner support. So for a learner now, they can jump onto one interface and interact with both Cognassist and OneAdvanced ePortfolio, which then gives the learner experience, like you say, a lot less friction and a lot less jumping in and out of systems and get that engagement that we really want to do. So I think what that, leads on to, in particular from what I was excited around when I first met you, Chris, was, the better outcomes for the learners, actually seeing them, become unique individuals, but also getting the best out of themselves through that learner journey. So what was your thoughts around that when we first met?
Yeah, that's the whole sort of reason for creating a Cognassist. And just to give a little bit of background, I went for education and found some things really, really difficult and some things really, really easy. And it wasn't until I also terrible at exams. I've got a special ability to fail every exam. And I went to university through an exam-free route called a foundation degree. So initially I thought, I've got to do an extra year of uni. And then I went to uni and thought, this is amazing. I get to do an extra year of uni. But and when I was at uni, third year, they came and got me and they said, Chris, you seem to be okay in your course, but every time we put you through an exam, you fail. We're going to send you off to an education psychologist. And it was then that he sat me down and said, you measure my cognition. He said, Chris, your brain thinks slightly differently to how we typically see brains think, which means, and this was where the penny really started dropping. He says, the way that we educate people and the skills that we give them and the strategies, a lot of them won't work for the type of way processing that your brain does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you different strategies. And I didn't believe him at the start. I thought there's no way these strategies are actually going to make a difference. But within 90 days, it completely changed my life.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, we should be able to give everybody an understanding of their own cognition so that we don't just get some sort of standard strategy that everybody else gets. It's much more applicable to our own neurology. And that's where the jump of the idea for Cognassist came about.
Fantastic. I think the other thing from my perspective, with the new Ofsted regime, with the inclusivity being at the forefront of it, I really wanted to partner with, a company that was really thinking about, in advancements of getting the learner from a retention point of view, actually being successful, in achieving the qualifications, then going into the workplace. So, I was really keen to see the difference in the statistics that you've got around, how it helps people, retain on the programs is phenomenal. Do you want to share a bit about, how that's starting to play out now?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been able to measure around about 500,000 learners within the post-16 environment now. So it's one of the largest cognitive data sets on Earth, which is fantastic. And from that, we've been able to see that around about 10% of learners, it's about 9.3 exactly, but have quite conventional way of thinking. what you typically imagine how someone thinks. But that leaves around about 91% of learners think slightly differently to that more conventional. And about 20% are significantly different. So we describe it as more than 2 standard deviations from the mean. So you've got about 90% of learners that think slightly differently to the standard, typical way you would think they think. So the challenge there is enormous. It just puts it into perspective. But when you can put adjustments in to support those individuals on the more significant sides, we've seen a 14 percentage point improvement in achievement rates. So we've been working in the sector now for about 7 years. We've been able to gather quite a lot of data on this. Soon we've got a really interesting report, fully empirically based report coming out on this. So we'll share that.
That'd be fantastic to see. I mean, that's really key because, I mean, not just also around the learner outcomes from the actual providers themselves. That obviously retains funding, and the funding for actually seeing the learner through to the end of the programme. And obviously it also hits on their achievement rates. So I think it's a win-win situation. The learners getting, their unique learning experience, but then you've got the training provider, actually retaining the funding and then obviously getting the achievement rates to prove that they're a good.
On the back of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that leads on to a real good point around compliance. Because one of the things or one of the pain points or problem statements I'm hearing in the sector is how do they evidence that inclusivity? And not just for an Ofsted, but just, how do they evidence it? And then how do they track it? How do they monitor it? How are they seeing the positives and the negative impacts of that, as it's coming through, as the learner goes through that?
Yeah, and I think evidencing can be a challenge, especially in something where it's actually quite specialist. How do we understand what's going on inside of someone's cognition? Then how do we respond to it? Then how do you review those adaptations that we've put in place because they won't all work?
Yeah.
And how do we systematically structure that process so that we can continuously scale it across the organization? It's a really, really complex process. So initially, I think we need a really robust and clinically accurate assessment tool that is able to deeply and accurately measure what's going on there so that we can tailor the right adjustments to the right areas of cognition. That we can now do that with technology. We couldn't do it with technology pre-cloud computing. And now what the adjustment plans pre-AI, you couldn't build those with technology as well. But now because of AI, we can also put really robust personalized adjustment plans in place for learners as well.
That's fantastic.
And that process of assess,
Yeah.
then design a plan, and then deliver against that plan, now bringing the educator to say, right, how am I going to deliver against this plan that we've co-constructed with the learner? And make sure the educator's comfortable knowing, I'll try 10 adjustments, maybe 7 will work, maybe 6 will work, and know for a fact 10 won't work because every learner's individual, every environment's individual. But just having that flexibility to build that into the review process.
I mean, that must make so much sense, of the evidence base that you actually need, to enable the learner to be really empowered in their own, learning journey. Like you say, 6 of the interventions might work, but that's obviously got to make them feel a lot, more in control of how they're, leading their own learning, within the environment without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely. And these strategies, they're not just for learning.
Yeah.
People will deploy them in their work, in their social life.
Yeah.
They're just strategies that help us think and learn. And whether we're thinking and learning while studying, or whether we're solving a problem at work, or whether we're trying to negotiate about who's cooking tea tonight. Those things.
Absolutely. I think that brings me, swiftly on to the next point was the employers. I mean, obviously from an apprenticeship point of view, we're talking about all learners at this moment in time, but if we, specifically talk about apprenticeships, in the workplace, that adaptability of those skills that the assessment and their plan is telling them, allows them to, transfer those into the actual workplace. Have you seen any evidence, or heard anything from the employers that, evidences that?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things we see is that individuals quite often, they're reluctant to notify their employer. So getting learner permission to share from a provider's position how they're better supporting that learner sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't happen. But quite often employers are really encouraged to want to make flexible adjustments because ultimately, as an employer, they just want increased productivity. So most adjustments are very, very simple. And if they can just make a little bit of flexibility here, but get better output, that's ultimately what an employer is aiming for. But there's something really critical about if someone's going through an apprenticeship, it tends to be because they're progressing on the career. And strategies tend to either be something you can carry on throughout, or they might be great for a specific moment in time. But if I'm not managing people and then all of a sudden I'm managing people, I'm going to have very different strategies I'm going to need to adopt. And with an apprenticeship, you absorb new skills so you can take on more responsibility. That step change will require new strategies to be adopted. So having a circular link between provider, learner, employer, and making sure that the manager's involved can really help close that loop and remove barriers and add in stronger strategies.
Absolutely. I'd love for you to tell the audience around one of the adjustments that you spoke about earlier on that I just didn't associate to an adjustment about the car seat. Just, explain that in regards to people being able to evidence. They don't have to be massive interventions. They can be just small tweaks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When we talk to educators and learning organizations, we quite often hear them say, oh, well, I always do that.
Yeah.
You see, you don't always do that, actually. You've only done that with 5 of the 30 learners, for instance. But that's an adjustment. But because it's standardized inside their mindset, they don't realize it's a tool that they pull out into their toolbox.
Yeah.
And the adjustment you're talking about, this morning I drove here and I used my wife's car. So when I got in, I had to move the seat back and I moved the steering wheel forward. But that's a standardized adjustment that we're all accustomed to. And educators have the same standardized adjustments inside of their toolbox. They just don't recognize them as adjustments. And what we need to do is recognize these, because once you start giving them a name and incorporating them into your practice, it's very easy then to evidence that, oh, well, I did this adjustment for this individual and this adjustment, rather than it just being part of the norm, which it is. But then you're able to sort of document it, make sure that it's recorded, but also start thinking, well, what other adjustments do I have in my toolbox?
Yeah, absolutely. They've automatically been probably using, because inclusivity, to be fair, it's been in the education system for decades. It's just now got a greater lens on it, because I feel it means something not just for one individual. It's making sure it's catering for the whole group, rather than just that one individual in the group. So adjustments are made, like we mentioned earlier on. Adjustments are made throughout.
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right. Good educators, they just have lots of these tools in the toolbox anyway. They just don't realize they've got them.
Yeah, agreed. So, last and final thing, building on the future. Where do you see the partnership, going from today, tomorrow, and in the future? Or where would you like it to go?
So I think there's a couple of key benefits that customers will be able to get from this partnership. So big fan of having one front door for users, so they're not jumping between multiple systems and what we would just call cognitive switching.
Yeah.
So go into one system, get everything there. That also means that workflows are much more native. So that will allow more and more data and process to be captured so that leadership have stronger visibility. We've seen from most recent Ofsted inspection reports, leadership and governance and inclusion are 2 real focus points for them. If we can provide more information to leadership on what is your learner support pipeline, where do you have any bottlenecks, and then they can go and act on those bottlenecks.
Yeah.
I think that workflow is going to be really, really useful. Third one as well, I'm a really big fan of how we utilize cognitive data to perform action. Cognitive data in itself doesn't really have a lot of value, but it's what do we do with that data is critical. With the data infrastructure that OneAdvanced building, we can combine what we call cognitive data with non-cognitive data. So you can start seeing trends such as, oh, well, did you know people with a high visual bias, and around about a third of people have a high visual bias, a third verbal and a third no particular bias, or people with a high visual bias, they tend to struggle a little bit more on this part of the course. Oh, great. Well, we didn't know that before. What can we do there?
Absolutely.
Really simple forecasting capabilities here, but you need to blend the data to be able to get
Definitely.
this.
I think there's a couple of things from a OneAdvanced perspective. The intelligent platform, absolutely, that ecosystem of having the data, but it's not necessarily just the data, it's the insights that it's going to give. The secondary part of that is not having it just as a bolter. So we've really thought about the partnership of the integration to make sure that the actual workflows work through not just one system, two systems, but three systems. So it's moving out of either the LMS into, the Cognassist environment, but then, that front door, and I love that analogy, the front door for the learner is just, they've got everything in one place. They just have to work from that one front door and open it up. So absolutely, I think the evolution of that and how we can get that greater data visibility into the intelligent platform. And I think as IQ education starts to evolve and starts to bring, that more intelligence around the data workflows, I think that will be a game changer. Like you say, providing predictive interventions rather than reactive interventions to make sure that the learner's journey, is as successful as it possibly can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, when I sat down, when I was talking at the start, when the psychologist sat me down and said, Chris, your brain looks like this. If someone had done that to me at the start of my education, or maybe when I was choosing A-levels, they would have said, you know what, Chris, you're probably not going to like geography and history, but you're going to really like maths and physics.
Mhm.
But I had to go through 2 years of trying to figure that out myself. But I know that we actually have the science and capability to have, so I could have been told that straight away, and it could have helped me inform my decisions.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean don't choose history. It just means, you're going to have to work slightly harder on this one than that one.
Absolutely.
But we didn't have that intelligence.
Yeah.
And also, I think there's certain things we can do as Cognassist.
Mhm.
It's an independent platform. And there's certain things OneAdvanced can do as an independent platform. But it's one of those great opportunities where 1 + 1 is going to equal more than 2.
Absolutely.
So if we can put them together, there's a lot of value just in joining those two capabilities.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to an end, and thank you so much for the insights. And really looking forward to seeing how the partnership, flourishes as we move forward. So that's it for Chris and I. So I'm going to hand over to the apprenticeship management team, who are going to take you through the demonstration.